Hello everyone, I hope you're doing really well. Welcome to On the Settee, a brand new series, which I'll tell you more about. But firstly, I just want to welcome you into the front room, which is the beginnings of an ambitious long-term neighbourhood platform in Birmingham to be designed, grown and co-owned by local communities. For those who might be joining us for the first time, welcome. I'd like to give you some insight into what On the Settee actually is. So in the front room, the Settee offers a place of sanctuary, a place where you can take a load off. On our Settee, you'll discover conversations that will slot into your day, like a catch up with an old friend or your favourite song. Something that makes you feel kind of at home, open, yet vulnerable and connected with yourself and others. So this season of On the Settee features a range of talks from folks across Birmingham and beyond who are in reading and writing and book selling communities. So books and reading are, kind of these really like amazing skills that kind of help us to access our ideas, experiences and stories that can be found at the heart of exploring yourself and the world around you. So in this series, we are, asking people like, what does it mean when you're writing these stories? Who are writing these stories? Whose experiences are being heard? And what voices are being excluded or included? And how do we kind of go about making books accessible in the city? So this series is curated and produced by Nikki B, who holds and runs all of our book-related activity. So I am your host. My name is Danny Ebanks Ingram, also known as Zaz and also known as Zazu. So today I'll be speaking to Samantha Williams, who is the founder of This Is Book Club, and Simone Mendez, who runs a Muted Book Club. So just to let everyone know, there is a Q&A that's open for this talk. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A if you're with us on Zoom. If you're watching live from YouTube, please feel free to drop any questions in the comments and they will be pinged over to us. So yeah, I guess this is the point where we get started, right? So it'll be really great for Samantha, and Simone to come on screen and just tell us a little bit about yourselves and yeah, what kind of Unmuted Book Club is, what This Is Book Club is. Simone, maybe if we like start with you, and also hello.
Hi, hello everyone that I can't see. I'm Simone, pronouns they, them, she. So I run the Unmuted Book Club. So Unmuted is a network for LGBTQ people of colour, specifically over the age of 18. And the book club started around 2018. So Unmuted was founded by Soraya Aisha, and they were the ones that told me to set up the book club because we would always sort of give book recommendations, and then they were just like, why don't you just set this up? I think you'd be great at it. And I was like, I don't know, that seems like a lot. But since starting and just connecting with some amazing people over literature, I think that sort of bond and connection that you have is just really special. So being able to look for books specifically that have cutie pock writers, queer, trans, intersex, people of color specifically, and recommending those books so that we can have those sort of discussions and just having that representation for people. Because as humans, I feel like we always crave seeing ourselves and seeing ourselves represented, whether it's on TV, whether it's in books, to just give ourselves that validation that we exist, that we're here, and that we're valued as humans. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. And Samantha, let's go over to you.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. We got you.
Good. I'll start again. Rewind. Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm from Book Love, which is a multicultural traveling book carnival. And we are a movement. It's really just me, but my vision is to create world where we have easy access to really multicultural and inclusive representative books for children and for adults, also known as diverse books, also known as anti-racist books now, which is what a lot of books are being called at the moment, that are, pushing this inclusive message. And Book Love, the carnival, has been going for about 4 years. And we travel to schools and nurseries. We work with lecturers and professors to try and make bookshelves and reading corners more inclusive and more representative. We also have a GoFundMe, which I started in the last few months, and that is to raise money to put more multicultural books into schools and nurseries for free. I don't know how long you want this intro to be, so just tell me to be quiet, Zaz, if I don't know if I should just keep going. But we do quite a lot. I'm actively campaigning for more representation. I feel very strongly about it. It's not a fluffy, woolly subject. It's a very serious subject with real psychological detriment if it's not properly tackled in a very constructive way very, very soon. We have lots of young people and generations coming through an education system that's not representative, and I'm really working hard to try and change that. You're on mute, Zaz.
Wow, you would have thought, we really have been on Zoom for a long time.
I know, right? We just keep
keeping ourselves on mute. Okay. Thank you both so much for those intros. Samantha, you started to kind of touch on what my first kind of question is anyway. So this question is kind of about what we kind of are trying to do and what our like motivations are for kind of creating these spaces. So it will be really good maybe to start with Simone, but you kind of mentioned that you're part of Unmuted, and Sarai said, I mean, we're always making these kind of recommendations anyway, so why don't you start this book club? So what was the kind of motivation that actually made you do the thing? Because we're like in so many spaces where you're like, oh, I could do that thing could happen, but what is it that really like pushed you to do it and to start the book club?
I think the thing for me, and why I consider myself so lucky, is having a community around me of other people who say are cutie park, queer, trans, people of colour, who support and uplift me every day. And I think if I didn't have that, and I didn't have Soraya kind of saying, you can do this, you're able to do it, because I think especially for us, like, imposter syndrome it really hits you flat, and it can really be overwhelming. So I think to have those people say, you have the ability to do this, and people want to be a part of this, so why not do it? So yeah, I think if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have started in the first place. And the fact that Unmuted was already set up as a network already, for me to have that sort of opening, and I already had that desire there to be like, I like talking about books, I like to read books. Like now, most of the books I read are from cutie park authors or, Black authors or whoever. So to be able to share that with other people and finding new books or books that are about to be released, and it's just kind of like, let's get on it, So yeah, I think having that community and having that sort of network around me is the thing that really propelled me into that, which was a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's something so like moving when even you saying that, it's from the community, it's from that kind of like love and care from your own community that's like made you even feel that you can do that, and to give you that like confidence to do the thing. And I think there's there's a piece really around that, about it kind of not only just being the fact that there's opportunity to do it, but actually having the support to do that as well. And there's something really interesting and important about that, because so many ideas happen, and like there's sometimes not enough resource to really create that and make that work. And that resource isn't always monetary, like, you know, it can also just be like the support of your community and that care. So thank you for that. Yeah, so Samantha, you did kind of start to touch on it a little bit, but I think what is it? I think my question really is like, what was the motivation to really kind of tie this into young people and children? That's what I'm really interested in, because I know Book Club, you have like a range of titles and a range of kind of you know, books that touch on different age groups. But what was that kind of rooting for young people and children?
Yeah, I think like Simone was saying, I think, you know, when you look at Simone, you look at yourself, Zaz, you look at me and all the other beautiful Black and brown people out there, you know, we're gorgeous, we're lovely, we have so much to offer the world, we have so much culture and stories and vibrancy to add. And, you know, I just feel like the world, you know, the world is almost, you know, I worry about this too, like the world being very two-dimensional space where, you know, we're not including these multicultural stories and these multicultural narratives. And I feel that in a lot of ways, the world is very two-dimensional because there's so much content that we bring to the table that's not getting the platform, and it's not visible. I'm very much speaking you know, from a UK context. You know, we are based in the UK. The dominant culture is white, it's Anglo-Saxon white, or, you know, don't know the various variations, but, you know, the dominant culture is white. And, you know, the people who sit at the top of these structures primarily are white, and they are making a lot of the editorial decisions, you know, within publishing or within media. So what you're getting is this sort of one narrative or this two-dimensional story that's being spun visually on television or in books. And, you know, the reason I'm kind of sort of mentioning this and why I started with this point that, you know, Black and brown people have so much to offer and have so many beautiful stories to share, because I feel at the moment that culture and this word diversity is sort of become a political football. And I'm getting really fed up and tired of the headlines at the moment. And for anyone in the UK who, anyone who's not in the UK watching, at the moment, we're in the midst of like this kind of race pandemic where it's just constantly on the news at the moment with regards to stats and acronyms and debate around policy and race. And, you know, it almost feels like representation now has become a bit of a chore, a bit of a burden. And, you know, when I started Book Love, like I didn't come into that for that reason. I wanted to show off our cultural heritage. I wanted children to see how wonderful their culture and their heritage was. And I didn't want teachers to feel like, oh God, we've got to tick this diversity box, you know. And I can see that it's really moving in that direction. I suppose I might be digressing a little bit. I think the last 3 weeks, and well, even longer really, the last 4 weeks particularly, have been really, really difficult, I think, for people of colour. The amount of news and this kind of sort of heaviness in the atmosphere with regards to race and identity. And I really worry about that. But in response to your question, you know, I started Book Love because, you know, I was very aware that, you know, children and young people especially were not getting access to their beautiful culture and heritage, and other children who perhaps, you know, were white English were not getting access to the beauty of the diverse cultures within which they were living and existing. We live in a global community, and that's just not represented in classrooms. And I was really aware of that, plus because I've worked in television as well, and I could see that was happening there too. So Book Love was really born out of a place of wanting to right many wrongs, and I never really started this with a business in mind. You know, it's kind of just sort of taken off. But it's a lot of work, but it's very important work, and work that I've made a lifelong commitment to, actually.
It's really like so nice to hear kind of you really give that like broad and like narrow and in-depth like overview, because there's something about when you're a young person, when you're a child and you are not like able to maybe like watch TV and just see someone who looks like you, and that's not the norm, we do often go to stories like to find ourselves, to connect with ourselves. And actually I really understand and connect with what you're saying about kind of just giving people like access, right? And it doesn't just have to be access for young like people of color, but it's also like allowing other people to see our culture and to connect with our culture, and that just be really normal. And I always feel that there's so much about like white British culture that like I just know from literally watching television, or like, you know, the main character of a book, that's like their life or whatever, and it's just like so normalized to me. And actually the need and like the necessity for like our culture to just be normalized to like everyone else's way is really important, because there's this area of sharing. So thank you for just kind of like touching on that, Samantha, because I think it's really important as like the conversation goes on. We're probably going to get into more of that as well.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that, you know, when we talk about activism and the things that we want to change in the world, you know, it's very difficult to look at those changes you want to make without looking at the structures in place. And it's those structures in place that sadly almost make it very, very difficult to do the work, because there are gatekeepers and walls that are built very, very high. So whilst we could be out here doing all the work, you get to a point and you think, well, something has to change up here. And it's like, when do you stop uprising on the ground and doing all of this hardcore grassroots work if you're just going to get to this place and you can't go any further? So that I'm kind of wrestling with that in myself at the moment, and maybe that's why it's come out in this long-winded rambling answer.
No, it's absolutely fine. You know, it's the real experience of what you're going through, and that's really important. Sim, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, definitely, in terms of like gatekeeping, and whether it's in publishing or just seeing the books on the shelves and what's at the front and what's not, what you will always, because you know, if someone's exploring a bookstore and they go in and the first things that they're going to see, if it's not something that reflects themselves, it's going to almost put them off and put people off from reading, because we grow up and we learn about the classics, you know, we learn about the Hemingways and the Shakespeares and all these people, and half of them I haven't even read, because it's like, if you can't connect with it on such a level, it doesn't resonate, you know. And I think education doesn't have to just be from this colonial like white lens of this is real history, this is true literature, this is the classics. So if you don't know this, then you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. And it's like, why can't we create this new narrative of like, we're creating stories that reflect our lives, reflect our struggles, reflects our joy, you know? And that's something that we can relate to. Like, even when I was younger, I think one of the first books I really like resonated with, I was always like a younger from a young age, a reader from a young age. And I remember reading this book, and it was about this girl. I can't remember the name of the book, but she was like an angel. I think she may have been white or mixed race, I can't remember, but her friend, and I remember this clearly, like he was black and he had locks and he was an angel. And it was this whole thing of like, and he was so gentle and like all of these things, and just seeing that in a book from so young and knowing that it's like, we're here, you know, even just this representation of like, who can get into heaven, you know, and it's like, we're out here, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, even just like those moments of almost not having to deliberately go out and find yourself as well. I think there's something that's it for me right now. It feels very like it's a dominant feeling of, I need to go out and purchase this particular book or start looking at this particular literature. It's not something that I could just walk into a bookstore often and just be like, oh, that's a bit of me. Do you know what I mean? In a way that isn't deliberate. I remember like ages ago, I remember calling up like a major bookstore, being like, hey, have you got this book? It's Bell Hooks. And then being like, we can order it in. And even that, in a moment, I was like, wow. Words now it's different, right? Because we're having these conversations.
We stock that book. We stock Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks.
It's such a great book. They're all like, and I've only recently got into bell hooks. That's also a thing. But in that moment of trying to, you know, just wanting to walk into a bookstore and find the thing, it's really interesting now in the way that the conversation is changing. Samantha, you mentioned this, you know, that we're using like terms like anti-racist and you know, diverse books and da 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 da. There's something about that and those terms. For me, there's part of it that like really niggles at me, because I find it frustrating that we have to use the term diverse books for a book that just is like someone's normality or someone just speaking about their own life, but because it's maybe a person of color, whether that means the author's a person of color or they're like, you know, the characters within that, I find that quite heavy. Samantha, I don't know if you maybe have some like comments to make about that. I find that quite hard.
Like I said at the beginning, when I first started Book Love, it's funny, I'm an activist. I spent 15 years in television trying to champion diverse stories, but I wasn't actively trying to be an activist. I was just like, yo, I've got stories, my people have got stories, there's stories in my community. I want to tell this story about this Rastafarian mum or this Muslim dad or whatever. Like, I was tired of seeing the same picture, the same homogenous picture on screen all the time. And I was very excited by my Caribbeanness, my Bajanness. I grew up in Barbados. I went to school there, and I grew up on an island that was full of culture and theatre and art and music and like just storytelling and music. Like, it was amazing, right? So when I'm working in working on television programs and I'm not seeing that represented, and it's the same for books as well, if I'm not seeing that and feeling that, I feel at odds with what I'm producing, with what I'm making. It's like, you know, I left television for that reason, and because I got very tired of trying to sell how, you know, the beauty of culture. It felt like, you know, this shouldn't be such a hard pitch, you know. And you know, with Book Love, it's the same thing. You know, I came to it because I wanted to shout about the beauty of our community and what was happening, and so much beauty in our history and our culture. But, you know, it was very difficult, and, you know, my children weren't getting access to these books, and you know, my community weren't getting access to these books, and, you know, it was time to do something. So I would gather these books and I, you know, and take them to schools and try and help teachers, you know, find these books easily, because that was one of the problems, you know. So we can't find the books, we don't know where to find these books. And really, that's how it all started. But, you know, about these terms like anti-racism, and look, the world has changed so much in the last year since the death of George Floyd, like, and the pandemic, and it's just been these two major events that have just collided and created this whole new atmosphere. And I'm still quite unsure about where this is going to go next, like what's going to happen next after we've had this, you know, this new wave of interest in multicultural books, although it's now, you know, they're now being called sort of more anti-racist books. You know, the world is a very different place. You know, diversity and anti-racist work now has become a very rich commodity, and that is going to really affect how people do business. And it's a very unique time that we're in, and I'm sort of waiting to see over the next few years if this is a real trend, or whether we are if we are witnessing a change. And I'm not convinced of that change yet. I'm still unsure. I don't know. I don't know how you feel, Simone, about that. I mean, do you know what I mean about this? The UK is in a very strange place at the moment with regards to race and representation, and
Absolutely.
even with this race report that just came out. I mean, you know, it's a bit scary, to be honest. Simone, I mean, what do you think?
I feel like it is it's complicated because it's such an intense time, like you're saying. Last year this happened, and everyone then sort of jumped on this hype, shall we say, of like, let's absorb all this anti-racist work. And I think my concern is that people are going to get so absorbed in just absorbing all of this Black trauma and all of this sort of, oh, it's so terrible, which it is. There's so many things that are going on and people need to be made aware. But I think we don't want to make Black trauma a commodity in the sense that we're losing sense of everything else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I feel that at the moment, and I feel very triggered by it, which is why I always like to make this point that Book Love is not only and exclusively about this anti-racist dogma. It's not just about that. I don't want to be framed in that way. I want to be elevating and amplifying the beauty of culture, and it's a gift, not coming at it from this other angle. And I'm always wrestling with those two narratives. You know, it's very burdensome, you know, having to constantly wrestle. I suppose if you're, you know, a straight white person, you don't, you know, life must be so much easier. But again, I don't want to generalize, because there are straight white people who I'm sure have challenges as well in their own way. So yeah.
This like conversation around like Black trauma and it becoming the only like narrative of how people are looking at Blackness, like that is something that I feel so deeply, because it's almost like we acknowledge that within like our own communities that there is so much kind of like diversity, or
in the real sense of the word.
The real sense of the word.
Yeah.
And so much variation, and you know, within like our cultures, there's so much that like, you know, it is just different, right? The way that we like cook certain foods is different to each other, and
it's gorgeous, it's beautiful.
And this is the thing, there's something about that narrative and those stories maybe becoming lost because it is people just viewing Blackness through the trauma, through the anti-racist lens, which is very important. But there's something about like just our everyday normal experience, or the stories that we want to tell, or the things that we want to explore, things we want to dream about and imagine. There's almost a fear of that kind of getting lost, not lost within our own communities, but lost within kind of the global conversations and stories. So that's something that I really like grapple with. And you know, there are times when I'm kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna buy a book, right, that is like it's just like a story that is nothing like how I live my life or anything, and I'm just gonna totally lose myself in that. And you know, some of that is because the other books that I choose to read are, you know, are kind of fitting into this kind of anti-racist kind of narrative, because I want to learn the stats and I want to know, do you know what I mean? I just want to be armed with those things. But there are times I totally have to just escape, or just find like a writer that's often a person of color who is just writing about some really awesome stuff that isn't holding any of that right now, right? And we have to have space for all those things to exist. This kind of moves us on to the next kind of bit of the conversation. I really want to speak a little bit about curation and how you both kind of go about curating books for the for Unmuted's book club, but also for Book Love. Like, what does curation mean in that kind of process of creating the journey? Maybe if we start with you, Sim, what does that yeah, what kind of books are you thinking of, and the books that you think are really important to kind of bring into the book club?
Yeah, I think like, and I always bring it down to community, but I feel like, the hill that I'm going to die on is, our activism, or my activism, and what I see revolution looking like is joy, is community healing, is like those spaces. So when I'm curating, like picking books for book club, I want to see my community reflected in the things that I'm giving. So there's books that I would personally choose that I'm like, oh, I really want to read this one, so I'll pick it because like I think it's great. But it's also like, what do people want to see? What do people want to see themselves in? Even for example, there was a book that we discussed last year. I think it's from Samra Habib. It was about being a queer Muslim and just things like that. And there's so many different, like the cutie pot community is not homogenous. There's so many different avenues and identities within that. So it's just making sure that like as much as possible, everyone will be able to see themselves. And even for me, that was still a really enlightening read. It was really good. And just making sure that there's still joy in it as well. So even not focusing too heavily on the trauma part and more on we see ourselves thriving and see ourselves living these lives without having to tie ourselves down with, this trauma is driving me, which it definitely can be a driving force with the things that we have to go through. But I think we can't, well, for me anyway, I can't get lost in that. Like you say, like Zaz, you want to read books that's like a complete escapism. And I think sometimes that's just really nice to get absorbed into a world that's just not about the everyday things that are like making it hard to get out of bed every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. Samantha, what about you? What does curation mean in the work that you're doing?
Well, when I first started Book Love, I was only doing children's books, so I had a very clear idea of what kind of books that I would stock, because I would be able to look at the pictures and the illustrations, and if they were positive and non-stereotypical and varied and diverse in the true sense of the word, then I would want to stock those books, right? So those are the kind of books I would be looking for children. Now I also stock adult books, and that makes it a little bit harder because I can't read every single book that I stock. So I have to rely on marketing, press, what people are talking about, what's going to sell. Okay, so I do succumb to some of these anti-racist books because that's what people want to buy. And Book Love does have a commercial arm, so I do have to sell books that will, be attractive and appealing so that I can make some money to keep going. But in terms of my own personal curation, what I really like is finding those hidden gems. So books by authors who are not getting that big marketing push, who are brilliant and who are quietly producing gems of books that people don't know about. So people like female authors like Buchi Yamacheta, who is no longer with us. She was a Nigerian writer who came to Britain in the 70s or 60s or 70s, I think. And she produced so many fantastic novels. And her books are fantastic. And not many people know about these books. But they are being resurrected again and getting some love. So books like that. I mean, I work with a lot of schools. So teachers will often come to us and say, "Oh, can you find me some books about, say, a family celebrating Ramadan or something?" So we get requests as well. But in terms of like what I like to stock, I'll try to balance it with the bestsellers, but also will try to find those more opaque titles, a bit more obscure, that people haven't heard of, because I think there's some wonderful literature out there written by African and Caribbean writers that are just sat on shelves gathering dust in warehouses somewhere in the middle of England that aren't getting the love. And they are beautiful books. So I get really excited. And we do bilingual books as well. So that's another really interesting area. But curation is a big job. And, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that you have as a bookseller to make sure that the books that you sell aren't reinforcing negative stereotypes and are fair and balanced. And so that can be a bit overwhelming at times, because obviously, you know, I have to make sure that what I sell is representative of Book Love and what I stand for. So yeah.
I think it's quite interesting, actually, sort of like the difference of curating as a bookseller and the difference of curating whilst leading a book club. Because I think for a book club, if I choose a book and then I'm reading it and I've already chosen it, and you kind of see something in there that's like, oh, that's a bit, you know, that's something that we can actually sort of talk about together, and I can bring that up and be like, what did you guys think about that part? That seems a bit counteracting, you know, everything else that's, you know, and we can have those nuanced discussions. Whereas a bookseller, I think there is a lot of weight on your shoulders to be like, if you're selling a book that maybe you haven't read, and people will be like, there's this in the book and you're selling it, you know.
I know. I feel like, oh, it was so much easier when I was selling children's books, because I could quickly look through them, or my children could read them. But with adult books, it's really difficult. You know, that I do feel responsible for what I sell, and I'm always thinking, oh, it'd be great if I had like a team of volunteers who could just read books for me and summarize them, and all like do sensitivity checks in them before I sell them. So if there's anyone watching who wants to receive free books in exchange for like doing sensitivity checks, let me know, and then we can work something out, because I can't possibly, we
read everything.
Close to 2,000 books. I can't read them all, but you know, I flick through them and I get the general feel for the book. But you know, the anti-racist books, as they're now being called, you know, were just like flying off the shelves at one point. It was insane. You know, the demand for them was like, what? It was mad. And it stopped now.
But then there's also the thing that you mentioned, Samantha, about kind of, you know, you having to also run your business and to like make, you know, like make that kind of money to be able to like continue doing this work. And there's something about that as well. It's like, you know, our kind of the choices that we're making, that people make, kind of you as a bookseller, Simone, as someone who is running like a book club, it's really tied into, we also have to tie that into the capitalist like system that we live in, right? And it's really there. It's
this is why the publishers have been commissioning these books,
right?
There's an appetite, and where there's appetite, there's money.
And that's the thing. And, you know, there's so much, as you said, there is kind of weight, especially as like, you know, a one-person team at the moment who is like, you know, trying to really like make that difference and just kind of like put the books out there so people have access to it. And there is like such a huge moral responsibility. And I think sometimes bigger publishers don't necessarily have to take that moral responsibility and that be also personal as well. It can kind of be like, oh, that happened as like an organizational thing, but you know, and it can kind of become easily forgotten about in some ways as well. Also, just to let you know, we've got a hand up for someone who's like, I will read books and sensitivity check these for you, by the way. So that's pretty cool.
Good.
We'll connect up. Yeah, thank you for that, because I think curation's quite difficult, and actually it's not a word that means the same thing in different like industries and across like the arts.
Yeah,
it's just not. And there's something about what that looks like. And I guess for me, when I think of how books are curated, I do really see that as like something that someone is kind of, it's a guide, isn't it? It feels like that. It's a guide as someone who like is just a reader who likes to just go and like, and you know, pick things up. If I see like a book that's like at the front of the store, or it's like on the home page of a website, I'm like, oh, what's that? You know what I mean? And straight away that they're the things that catch your eye. And I think curation just ties in like so much with how we're kind of allowing people to get that access as well. And what we're almost like seeing as the most important thing or the place to start. So thank you for just kind of giving us a little bit of an overview there. I really appreciate that, because that's like a little bit of like a nugget of information for me now. Like, you know, when I'm looking for stuff, what is it that I'm trying to connect with? And I just wanted to pick up on something that Sim said earlier. You were kind of mentioning of like reading like the classics, or how kind of the classics are like I haven't got words today, how the classics are shown, right? And if you read the classics, you are at a certain point in your reading, in your knowledge, in your and I think a lot about this, about art in general and like creativity. It's almost like being able to understand or know that there's a history, but not have to feel that you need to connect with it in a very specific way, considering that so much of like the history of things is so colonial. It is so kind of it's through very specific, often white lenses, and I just want to just kind of touch on that as well, because it's something that is prevalent everywhere. It's almost like, you know, if you see like historical things about like surrealism, that doesn't mean you understand it for yourself in this moment. And I just found that quite interesting and really important. I would also like to touch on some more things about publishing, really. And Samantha, this might be a good place for maybe you to kind of go first. I wanted to just ask, what has the journey been for you with publishing and kind of connecting with publishers? Like, what are not just the obstacles, but just kind of what has that journey kind of looks like, and what do you kind of, what is it that maybe some of the misconceptions around publishing and being a like independent bookseller? What are your kind of thoughts around that? It's a bit of a two-parter question there.
Well, my relationship with publishing is, I am a bookseller and they make books, and so our relationship is very much like supply and demand. Like, they're the suppliers and I'm the seller. So that's like kind of the very, like, if you strip it back, that's it. You know, they want me to sell their books, I want to make money from selling their books. So that's like the very kind of raw relationship there. But of course, I didn't come into this to just make money. In fact, I never came into it to make any money, I came into it because I was an activist and I wanted to promote and celebrate and amplify and highlight our beautiful culture, which we've talked about already. So that has always been my agenda, but that's not necessarily the publisher's agenda. So when you get these two agendas coming together, there's a little bit of a crash. Yeah. So I've been navigating this crash for 4 years, and it's very hard. It's very hard. That's really it in a nutshell, to be honest. You're, when it's like a relationship, if you meet a guy or a girl, and he or she wants one thing, marriage and kids, and you want to travel the world, you come together, there's going to be a clash, right? Because you're not on the same page. So that has really been my journey with publishers, and it's a really tough one because I'm constantly feeling like I have to prove myself to my lover, give me a chance, I'm not a bad person, I'm just trying to do the job. It is a bit like that. There are some publishers who have been fantastic and very supportive and speak the same language as me, maybe one or two of them. But I would say that the majority of them are very difficult to work with and don't share the same agenda or ethos as myself. So that does become very tiring and very demoralizing and exhausting. But I have a job to do. So I continue, and I will continue. And I don't expect it will get any easier. But that's not my concern. I have a bigger picture in mind, and I just have to deal with that and find coping mechanisms to deal with the publishers. If you had asked me that question 2 years ago, I probably would have answered it very differently. So even hearing myself answer in that way shows that there has been some growth, and I'm having to be quite zen about this whole experience of book selling, because really and truly the books are really incidental in this process. My vision and my agenda is so much bigger. The books really are just a bit of a stepping stone and a bit of a vehicle to get there. So I have to kind of remind myself of that when these clashes occur.
Yeah, I understand.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. And there's obviously so many other things that are like motivating you to keep going, and that's that bigger picture, and not kind of getting
it's always, and again it's the growth. I think when, you know, I'm a small person in theory, you know, there are big white corporate structures. I'm a Pan-Africanist, try to be. I'm an activist, I'm pro-black, I'm very politically left. I have all of this going on whilst I'm trying to dance with these big white corporate structures. We're always going to butt heads. It's just the way it is. We're gonna clash on the dance floor because we're listening to different music. We're just speaking different language, you know, but that's okay. I have to just navigate that space constantly, and that is what is actually really hard work. Actually, it's the politics at that kind of senior structural level that I have to deal with. And as a woman of colour in those spaces, it's tough, but bigger picture. And I have to just keep reminding myself of that. And there's so much work to do. And if I step off, I'm done. Who else is going to do it? So big up to all the other booksellers out there who are, you know, black or, you know, Asian or, you know, from the, you know, LGBTQ community, anyone who is deemed from a minority group, even though I hate that expression, but you know what I mean. Anyone who's not part of the dominant culture trying to do this sort of work, you know, keep going.
Absolutely. I really, thank you for that, because there's that thing of like keeping your foot on the gas, right? And it's also quite difficult, especially when we are also trying to like center our joy and our happiness as well. It's like these things are existing, not almost in conflict, but are existing in a way that isn't like harmonious together, right? And it's something about that, holding all of those things and still trying to like, you know, be a person and like, you know,
and look after your children and look after your home and yourself and your family and look after your body. You know?
Absolutely.
Like looking after my body is like down here on the list, and it shouldn't. It needs to be up here, but it's not. But you know, Simone, what it's like. I mean, anyone who's doing this work, it's you put yourself last the whole time, and that's wrong. I need to work out how to move myself to the top, because without me, there's no one to do this, my work, not all work, obviously, but to do the work I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, mental health and physical health and spiritual health is very, very important. And you know, when you are doing this kind of work, you're often taking a daily battering. I do anyway, but you know, I'm sure, I don't know Simone or if anyone else in the room is. I mean, we all take emotional and different kind of batterings in different way, whether it be at work or, you know, when you're a woman of colour or a person of colour or from a so-called minority group. You know, it's that having to, that navigation, that compromising all the time, all working things out. You said grapple with, again, wrestling with, trying to center, work, it's constant.
It's a whole process. And actually, Sim, I don't know if you maybe want to add some points here, because I know that in your kind of like personal practice, and we've spoken before about kind of what is that balance, and taking those like moments of trying to center joy and self. So it'd be nice if you could drop some wisdom here.
I will try my best. But definitely, I think there's always so much going on, and I think especially for us, it's like, as much as, you know, we try and do the work, whatever that means for us, whether it's like community healing, whether it's activist work, whether it's, you know, signposting certain things, I feel like just recentering ourselves and reminding ourselves that, like, if we're not here, what's the point? You know, so whether we get burnt out when we're running ourselves to the ground, it's sort of like, if we're not prioritizing ourselves, isn't that the whole point? Isn't the whole point to stay alive? Isn't the whole point for us to thrive? Isn't that what our ancestors wanted? Like, our ancestors wouldn't want us here to keep burning ourselves out. And the work is hard and it's tough, and it's on so many different levels for so many different people. But I think I always have to come back to the point of, I always have to check in with myself, because this is the only body I have in this lifetime. And, you know, my ancestors want me to share that joy with other people. So doing that work, it's shedding a light, and in a way it is healing for other people, because when we're sharing these stories of joy and triumph, like the author Akwaeke Emezi, who I'm like, amazing
favorite author right now. Go on.
Exactly. Because their work, like their YA novel, for example, is about a Black trans girl who's out hunting monsters, and she's nonverbal sometimes, so everyone around her learns sign language, you know, and it's just these beautiful moments that are so, just little snippets, and it doesn't have to be a forced thing, but it's like people are showing joy to this young girl who is trans, and that's not even the center of the story, but it's just a part of it.
I was about to say that, like, just an amazing book anyway. But there's this like thing where you feel that joy so deeply, because it's not like that character's identity isn't just like the root of the story. The story is like so much bigger, but you are connecting with these moments of wanting to understand people more, just like through reading this book, when you literally get to the parts where they're like, oh, people just learn sign language just so we can communicate. And there's something really beautiful about that. And even that point that you made, Sim, kind of about, you know, our ancestors almost like wanting us to like have better like ways that we live, right? And I feel that deeply, because there was a moment a couple of weeks ago where I was speaking to my friend, and I was kind of like, you know, like I'm here and I'm like feeling really low and feeling this and like my grandparents, like, you know, went through so much to be here and whatever, and I'm like almost not being grateful for that. And she was just like, I mean, not at all. Like, the whole thing is that actually all the things that our ancestors went through actually mean that there's a moment now where you actually can take a step back and say, oh, I'm feeling this thing, so I'm actually going to try and have those few days off. I'm going to try and do something really nice for myself. And that's allowed, because they would want you to be able to do that, right? That's like so much of the space that they were fighting for, so that you can be who you are.
Can I leave for 1 second? Something's burning in the oven.
Oh no burning yet. That's absolutely fine. Sim, so if I can just go into the like next week, because we do have some questions as well. But before we go into the questions, I just wanted to ask a little bit about what the future, or what you think the future of publishing kind of looks like. Like, what are some of the needs that you think need to be met by publishers? And obviously we speak about this in the realm of dreaming and reimagining, right? Like, because I know that there's a lot of work to kind of do. But what do you think some of those needs are, and what do you think needs to be done for them to be met, and for us to like have, you know, better experiences?
I think it's an interesting one, because I feel like Not that I've seen sort of like a movement of it, but I've seen it more often now where people, especially Black, brown, queer people, are going down like the self-publishing route because of these gatekeepers, you know, that are like mostly white, male, cis. And there's only, like Samantha was saying earlier, you're always going to hit a certain thing at this point in time. Like there's one author, for example, I have like a mini pile of books that I have with me to like recommend.
Okay, go on.
So this one, she's Birmingham-based Black author Ash Alves, and she published this literally just the other day, A Warrior's Reminder. And it's
title.
Pardon?
It's a great title.
Yeah, so it's just about healing, self-empowerment, stepping away and just sort of stepping back into yourself. And she went down the self-publishing route, as I've seen other people do, because it's sort of like, if no one else is gonna do this for us, if I can't elevate my voice through that platform, why can't I do it myself? And I think sometimes it's still going to be difficult in a sense of, you know, if you self-publish, there's certain routes you have to go down, like Amazon is like the main route. And obviously sometimes we want to try and deter away from that, which is why independent booksellers are so important. And they're doing
so important. Go on.
Yeah. So still creating these structures of having these independent sellers, if people want to publish their work independently, do they have that structure in their community around them to help elevate them if they don't have, say, the same marketing strategies that someone else does from, I don't know, Simon and Schuster, you know? So again, just creating that infrastructure in our communities and just making sure that we're always gonna, if no one else has got our back, at least we've got each other's back. Do you know what I mean? Which hopefully that would be a sustainable thing that can carry us through and step away from, you know, these corporate focuses and bringing it back to what it is about, which is literature, sharing stories. You know, back in the day, it was oral stories. We're telling these stories from word of mouth. We're sharing these, passing it down to generations. And just, yeah, bringing it back to the root.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I feel like I've said thanks so much in this talk, but I'm like, I am really like just so grateful for like all of this. It feels like so filling. So I'm actually gonna open up the Q&A now. We actually already have a few questions that have come in. So thank you for everyone that's put in some questions. So yeah, this is the time. If you've got any more questions, keep adding them to the Q&A. So my first question is from Danielle Topping, and this is for you, Samantha. The question is, what are your thoughts on sharing discussions around the differences between us, even within the Black community? Writing from the Caribbean and even in the predominantly Black society, we know little about each other. Have you found that in your work with Book Love?
I think it's a good point that the diaspora is a really fascinating space. People of colour, speaking about Black people now specifically, you know, have all come from Africa. I know that, you know, white people have, and the big, you know, there's a bigger global diaspora too, but I'm talking specifically about Black now, have all come from the continent. And, you know, we were taken to many different places, South Africa, South America, North America, the Caribbean, and further afield. And there are these cultures that have been born out of this. And these stories need to be shared more. I would like to see more diaspora storytelling where people in the continent of Africa are speaking to people in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean community are communicating with the UK. For me, and with North America, for me, this is a really exciting idea, that I do believe in this shared experience. I know that we're all different, but I do believe in this shared narrative that whilst I may be here in London, someone maybe in South Africa or maybe in North America. But if you're a person of colour, I do believe that there is this lowest common denominator that does bring us together. And I would like to see more of that in stories, and more books being commissioned that share that and show that and highlight that. But that, again, that's not necessarily the agenda of the big publishers, is it, really, to kind of to unite in that way? So I think, I would like to see some more of that happening within self-publishing, and I think that's where the self-publishing really comes into its own. I mean, the person who asked the question, Danielle, she's I know that she's in Barbados currently, and wouldn't it be wonderful if there was some way of connecting Danielle's community in Barbados to Simone's community in Birmingham, and there was this like sharing of stories, and out of that were to come some kind of publication that brought these different communities from around the world together, so bringing the diaspora together. I don't feel like I see that happening a lot, but that doesn't mean it isn't. I just haven't really seen it happening, and I'd love to see it more.
Absolutely the same. There's so much that, like, there's so many histories and different things, right, within the diaspora that, even certain words that, like, I maybe find difficult to pronounce, right? And even that, like, our, like, colonized tongue in, like, so many ways, right? But the way that we kind of connect and learn and reconnect with, like, parts of ourselves is to, like, have the space to, like, connect and share those stories. And it's really, really important, because I think there's something around this, like, idea of even within our own communities that kind of puts up, like, these little, like, lines, right, and says, well, I'm from here and you're from here and we don't do things exactly the same. And that can sometimes become like a little jokey competition. But what about if we really just, like, embrace all of that and, like, take these those stories and sharing opportunities to really connect. That was a really great question. Thank you so much, Danielle. That was really great.
Danielle is an academic, so I'm not surprised she asked a question.
Yes, academic chat. Go on. We love it. Okay, so I have another question, which is from Felix, and this is for both of you, which is really great. So firstly, Felix has also said, I'm very much enjoying this. Thank you to everyone. So just put that out there too. Thank you so much, Felix, for being here. And would also gladly proofread anything as well. Samantha, we've got so many people in here who are ready to proofread. So the question is, would it be feasible and productive for book clubs and booksellers to form a collaborative network whereby book clubs feed back to independent booksellers about the quality of the titles that they review? Simone, do you want to go first?
That's really interesting, actually, because I feel like now that we have, not to say that there wasn't before, but Birmingham specifically, we have, say, like Back to Booksboro, who works with, I've been in touch with Alexia. I know that they're also in touch with, say, A for Activism, which is another book club in Birmingham focused solely on activist work and academic text. So to have that and do that and then feed back to the booksellers, so then people are more informed and they have discussion points around certain books that they could probably push further. I feel like that's a really beautiful thing. And again, that would create such a sense of community that would step away from the big gatekeeping publishers and bring it back to the grassroots, because we're talking about and pushing the work that we want to see. Yeah, I think it's lit.
Samantha, how do you feel about that? Do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think it sounds like a really good idea. The last year, I've noticed a lot of book clubs starting up. I don't know if you have as well, or maybe I wasn't paying attention before, but it just feels like, especially since the Black Lives Matter interest has really peaked, that there's just been every other minute a new book club starting up, often run by people of colour. So that's really brilliant. I would like to see the older community reading more as well, because I feel like a lot of these book clubs are focused on or run by quite young, like a younger kind of age group. And you know, the other day someone made a comment. I was talking to someone about Black people and books, and they said, you know, Black people don't read books. Now, this came from someone who was in their 60s, and I wonder whether there's something there that's a generational thing about this idea that older Black people don't read. And I don't know, just it made me feel really angry when that person made that comment. But when I think about a lot of the book clubs, they are being run by a younger demographic, really. So I would like to see older, sort of, you know, 50s, 60s plus, more book clubs being run by an older audience. But yeah, I would love to team up with more book clubs and like, you know, supply books to book clubs. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, because I think the whole thing around, because I know what you mean about older people, especially Black people, saying, you know, we don't read and things like that.
I just don't agree with it. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's definitely rooted in, say, like, you know, how I was saying earlier about the classics and feeling like this syndrome of, if you haven't read this, then you're not smart enough, or reading is only accessible to, say, the middle upper classes. And I think there's been such a shift, and I think maybe that's why there's so much being run by younger people, because I think our generation is very much like, can we shift this? Can we approach books and reading and literature in such a way that anyone can get into it and it's accessible? And even if it's older text, having those spaces where you can be like, I don't understand what that means. Can someone explain this to me? Because I think so many times, especially in the past, if book clubs are run by a certain demographic, whether it's just academics or just the middle upper class, there's sort of elitism that happens, and then it's pushing these people out that, say, are working class or maybe didn't come from a well-educated background, and they feel like they can't get into it now because it's too late for them, or they don't feel smart enough to get into it. And it's like, that's not true. I think you need to find the right people that are willing to have these conversations and to break things down more, because it's like, yeah.
I think that you know, reading and books and publishing is, you know, it kind of reputationally it's made to feel very white and very elitist and, you know, a very highbrow thing, a very highbrow activity, reading. And I really hope that changes. I really hope that changes. I think self-published books are a really powerful tool. And I feel, I mean, when I first started Book Club, I only sold self-published books because I didn't even know really what a publishing company was. You know, I was like, I just didn't even think in that way. You know, I was dealing with people on the ground who were writing books by night and had full-time jobs during the day, and were like producing books with Black characters in them, and that's all I sold for about a year. And it was great. It was great. So when that 1% stat came out, that only 1% of books published in the UK had a Black child in it, I was like, I knew that the representation wasn't there in the published books, but I had surrounded myself with so many self-published books where that didn't seem like my reality. So I think self-published writing is really exciting, but often it has to work for the writer as well from a commercial point of view, because it's not cheap, it's not free. You have to pay you have to pay yourself, you have to pay for the book to be made, you have to pay the illustrator or the graphic designer, pay to have it printed, and by the time you've paid all of that, sometimes you've got nothing left. So I'd like to see some investment in that area of self-publishing, because I think really uncensored voices, that's really the only way you're going to be able to really sort of hang on to those uncensored voices, because by the time you go down the publishing route, you know, it's being edited, censored, manipulated, changed in such a way that you've lost that authenticity, and it's the authenticity that's so important. And if you think about our elders, you know, those in their 60s, 70s and 80s, they have so many stories to tell, but they're not being commissioned. When did you last see a Black person over the age of 75 in this country get a book deal? I mean, correct me if there's anyone in the chat who can help. I know that we've had New Daughters of Africa, which was published, which was edited by Margaret Busby, but I know that she's not anywhere near that age. So, you know, she's a lot younger, but, you know, I can't think of anyone above the age of, you know, maybe 30 or 40 who are getting all of these book deals right now, all these anti-racist books. You know, they're all young people, because they're very marketable and they're very attractive and easy to sell, and it's great. I'm not knocking it, but it's one narrative and they're all quite similar. Absolutely. You're on mute, Jazz. Yeah, Zaz.
Hello?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there's something really about this, like, I feel like intergenerationally, like, we know lots of stories about, like, from our elders because they've been, like, spoken to us, so they've told us, or, you know, or we're kind of just in community with them. But there's something about that not translating through, and it almost then can become a space where younger people then feel like they need to tell the story. But then that also ties into what you're saying, right, of it being a certain demographic, a certain age group that is marketable and kind of at the forefront.
And to be honest with you, this is going to sound really bad, and it's not meant to. Kind of boring, like, you know, I want to hear elders. Like Danielle's just mentioned how the one-armed sister sweeps her house is a Barbadian author. I don't know how old she is, this author, but my friends just mentioned her. But I mean, Simone, I mean, Zaz, we all have got those people in our lives who are like 60 or 70 plus. And you know that if you sit them down, the stories and the content and what, you're like, where is that? Why are we not seeing those stories published? For me, if publishers really wanted to make a real commitment to this, that's what they would be going with. For me, those are the new voices, the new exciting voices. You know, social media is just, you know, if you've got more than 10,000 followers these days, you can just get a book deal like that. Maybe more than 10,000, maybe you need a bit more than that. But, you know, but it just feels like it's just this one voice that's being pushed at the moment. And it's good because a lot of Black authors are getting their time, their break, which is fantastic. But I would like to see some mature thoughts and mature writers coming through who have got this whole other idea and, you know, this whole other kind of experience and this lived experience that I don't feel is being shared.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really, it's a kind of a point of like push and pull in a way, because then we need to wrap up soon, but just to make this last point, it's a push and pull, because there's almost I think because we are so aware of like new terms and like new ways of connecting with people and things that are like more kind of up to date. I think sometimes there's a fear of connecting with elders who maybe like aren't up to date, whatever that kind of means. And I think sometimes there's a fear of someone saying something wrong or something that isn't like, that we don't say or we don't connect in that way anymore. But I think there has to also be space for those conversations, right? And it be like a connection and a place to like learn, experience, digest, and all of that. It's not just it's never just like a single layer of, you know, it's all nuanced really with how we kind of move forward with connecting with different generations, like, for sure. So I definitely I agree. It's actually like 1:15 already, which the time always feels like it just like goes like that. And I know that we could literally keep talking forever, and hopefully we get some more chances to kind of do that soon. But I just want to all the gratitude to Simone and Samantha. Thank you so much for just like partaking of this conversation, and just allowing us to just have this space. It's been really beautiful. at the end of every On the Settee, I feel really full, and I'm going to say it again and keep saying I feel so full, but it has been really beautiful. And thank you for just, being amazing people to kind of be here with us today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
No, anytime. Yes, so thank you so much. And normally at this point, I basically just go on to tell people what the next dreams and things are for On the Settee. So yeah, thank you both so much. And we have our next On the Settee episode, which is on the 1st of May. And I'm just going to share the screen with you and tell you a little bit about Chantel, who will be with us. So Chantel Edwards is actually part of, let me just make sure I get this correct. I don't want to mess up anyone's titles. So Chantel is the director of the Birmingham Literature Festival and creative producer at Writing West Midlands, and is Birmingham based. So I will be talking to Chantel about what it means to run Birmingham Literature Festival. Does that mean now that we're kind of going through this pandemic, and what are some of the hopes that Chantel has? So that will be on the 1st of May, and I'm really looking forward to that as well. So yes, everyone who's watching, who has been with us for this whole time, thank you so much. I appreciate you all, and we appreciate all the questions that have come through as well. I'm just going to leave this holding screen on, just so you can, see Chantel's face and know who's going to be here in a couple of weeks, and hopefully connects back with you all in a few weeks. So thank you all so much, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.